EESSI the past 4 years or so. And today we'll talk about the EESSI dashboard, which is a dashboard that we show our test suite results on. I'll also cover the test suite and how to run it. So yeah, session highlights today is going to be about the dashboard. The dashboard is publicly visible, so here's the URL. You can also find it via the EESSI official documentation. And to dive right in, so this is typically what the dashboard shows. This is an example where we see the results of a test for TensorFlow that we run on a periodic basis. There's a fair amount of systems that we run these tests on, and the main goal is to make sure that the EESSI software stack works as intended. And that means, of course, that we want to see a certain performance, and we want that performance to be consistent. So the main goal is regression testing, really. This is actually already quite a nice plot. If you dive into it a little bit, you see that most of the results are quite consistent, and every now and again you see a little dip. Since those dips are usually only one data point, that's typically something we interpret as, oh, there was, a hiccup on the system. It performed worse for one day, but it's not a consistent issue in the EESSI software stack, right? But if we would see something like this and the change would be consistent, that would be a reason for us to look into it and see like, hey, did something new get deployed there? Did we break something? Did we rebuild something that affected this piece of software? And then that would be like a big red flag and a reason to investigate. So the dashboard, as I said, it's public. It takes a little bit of getting used to figure out like how do I use all the drop-down menus on the left. So we'll cover that a little bit. It is described at the bottom, so if you want to try it yourself, it is described how you can use it. Basically, this is just the front end. It queries a database in the back end, and that database holds all of the past test results. For study, there's only one thing, but we can use this dashboard in a more general way. We also do that internally. Group, okay, there's a group called the EESSI test. That's all of the EESSI test suite, basically. And then this is the interesting part. So this is basically all the applications that we have right now in the EESSI test suite. For some applications, we have multiple tests.
Short interruption.
Yep.
I only see the third slide. I don't see your live
Shit. So
demo.
that was why I was asking earlier, like, did I actually share my screen? Apparently not. Okay, let me reshare then. Let me see. I intended to share the full screen so that I could swap easily between the applications. Do you now see the dashboard?
Yeah, now.
Awesome. Okay.
Thanks.
So
From the start again.
let me go through that again. So at the bottom here, you see basically the instructions of how to operate the test dashboard, let's say. On the left, there's something called a study. There's only one thing in the drop-down menu, so that's pretty trivial. The second thing, also only one item, because this dashboard was actually made for a more general purpose than just the EESSI test suites. But the really interesting part is the tests here. So that's a list of the tests where we have results from the EESSI test suite. So for example, the TensorFlow screenshot that I showed earlier is something I could fetch like this. Now I get a lot of data, right? It just shows all of the TensorFlow tests in the dashboard. There's a lot of different systems that push their data into the database. So to make things a little bit more easy on the eyes, I can say, okay, I only want the results of a single system. So for example, the Snellius Rome system. And then I want to color by scale. So this is the test scale at which the test is executed. We execute it on Snellius every day on 1 and 2 nodes, and then every week on sort of all of the other sizes that the EESSI test suite supports. So that ranges from 1/8 of a node to 60 nodes in total. And you see that from this test, I mean, it doesn't scale very well, right? That's not the purpose of the test at all. Like, it's not a benchmark. But what we want is that it is consistent enough that when there is a degradation, that we would spot it here, right? So ideally, you see a flat line if there's no issue, and a big dip if there is an issue. So over the past 30 days, that's the default. It seems to be pretty consistent. But we have found actual issues with the test. So quite recently, we have a test again. It's a little bit messy if you don't put all the filters in place. So the filtering is just to get a subset of the tests. Let's have a look at the tests on the H100 partition on Snellius. And then I'll pick one individual module file. So if there's multiple modules for a particular application, it tests all of them. But let's look at one. And I will actually look at one specific scale. So these are the intranode tests. So the purpose was that we wanted to test within one node what the bandwidth was between two GPUs. And what we saw was that the bandwidth was much lower than we theoretically expected. And that's how we actually found an issue in the EESSI software stack. We actually found an issue in UCX. We rebuilt it. Then we got a decent performance, and bam, the day after it was poor again. Not as poor as in the beginning, but again, it was pretty poor. And the second time, the cause turned out to be something in the test suite itself. So we were trying to do an intranode test, but for some reason, Slurm was giving us two nodes, and we were doing a test between GPU nodes instead of within one node. So basically, a poor performance on the test suite can mean two things. It can mean that something is wrong with the software stack, or something is wrong with the test suite. And the third thing is actually something is wrong with the system, right? So if the system has an underlying issue, you would also see it here. So that's a little bit in a nutshell how you can navigate the dashboard, and you can look around all of the nice data that's in there. There's thousands of data points. So there's probably also information that we haven't been able to dig out. A little bit about the test suite. So the challenge of designing the EESSI test suite was that we wanted to do this performance portable testing. So we wanted on different systems where we have EESSI deployed, we wanted to check, does it perform as we expect it to? And that's challenging. We wanted to adopt the reframe framework. That's not traditionally very easy to write portable tests in the reframe test suite or in the reframe testing framework. But we came up with a solution to that. We basically now separate all of the system-specific information. We can push that into the reframe configuration file. And we have an abstract class in the test suite that makes it easier for us to abstract information away. And that makes sort of sensible choices. So things like, I want to run this test on every, like one rank per core that's available in this system. And what that means is system specific, but it's a generic statement. So you can run the test suite yourself. You can download, you can clone the test suite. I will quickly show how to do that. I see I'm rapidly running out of time. And then there's some environment to set up. So you need to define a reframe configuration file. Let's first clone the test suite. I'll put, oh, there we go. Let me zoom in a little bit, make it a little bit bigger. So this is just an otherwise empty directory where I now have cloned the test suite. As part of the test suite, there's some default EESSI configurations for the systems where we do our regular testing. They also serve as nice examples for writing your own reframe configuration file. I won't go through it in detail, like you have to kind of learn how to write a reframe configuration file. You can use the reframe docs for that. There's a couple of items that are specific to the EESSI test suite, like which features and which extras we recognize. So there are some things, and these are clearly documented in the EESSI documentation. There's a page about the test suite and how to configure to run the test suite. So we have to set up some environment. So reframe needs to know how to find the configuration file, how to find the tests. It needs to search the test path recursively. Then we set a reframe prefix. Basically, all of the outputs ends up somewhere under that prefix. I need to set my Python path to make it aware of the test suite because we do some Python imports. And then there's two environment variables for EESSI that we set. Basically, it's quite common to run the test suite from a login node, but then if your login node does not contain GPUs, the test suite wouldn't be able to discover the GPU modules and it wouldn't run the GPU test. So to resolve that, we can override these two environment variables and basically tell EESSI, no, I want to see the module environment for a GPU node. So here I just put something for a Hopper system, but basically you can put any compute capability that you want that is supported in EESSI because all those environments are in principle identical. So let's run that. And then we have set up the environment. And then we load the EESSI module, we load the reframe module. EESSI build is an optional dependency. Like we use it in very specific tests, for example, the BLAST test in order to determine the toolchain hierarchy. That's pretty new actually that we do this. If you don't load it, it will just skip those tests. So you'll get a warning, but it won't crash or anything. And then we can list all of the tests available in the test suite. So for example, and this takes a while. So Reframe now crawls through the directory that you told it to search for tests, and it has to find every Python file in there and parse it and figure out, like, does this actually define a test according to the Reframe syntax. You get some warnings as well, like I'm skipping this test, I'm skipping that test because there's undefined parameters. In this case, that typically means there are no modules on your system that are required by this test. So there's actually no PyTorch in the EESSI environment yet, so also the test will not be generated. But if you have a local PyTorch module, you could actually use that test already and run it with your local PyTorch module. Now you can see it lists a whole lot of tests, 856. Basically, for every sort of test, there are different test instances. So you can run the same test, but at different scales. That's also what you see at the bottom here, right? There's a lot of TensorFlow tests. It's actually one computational routine that it does, but at different scales. And similarly, we often have like CPU and GPU variants of the same test. To make this a little bit more specific, you can add extra flags like the tag. We can tag tests with a certain tag. We have something called a tag that's called CI that will make sure that you only list tests that run in a very short time. So typically something up to 5 minutes or something like that. Another tag is basically the scale at which you want to run. So you can say single node or single core or 1/8 of a node. And then with the -n argument, you can even filter on the name of the test. So for example, if I only wanted to get short length tests on a single node, I would do the most specific thing out of this list. It will go through all of those search paths again. So again, it takes a little while. And then it comes back with a much smaller list in the end, hopefully. And fingers crossed. Waiting takes long, and there we go. There's 3 tests that match these criteria, namely 2 that will run on CPU for 2 different LAMP modules, and then there's 1 of these LAMP modules that's enabled for GPU, so that will also generate a GPU instance of that test. And now I use the list command, but if I actually want to run it, I just change that into --run, and it will start running those tests. Now that will take a little while. I don't think it's interesting to wait for those results, but you get a sort of overview of the performance numbers printed on the standard output. What we do with the test runs that we do, there's a performance report generated by Reframe, and we have a script that pushes that into our database in order for it to be visualized by the dashboard. And that's about it. That's what I wanted to explain and share with you. Are there questions on this part? Maybe we start with that, Richard, I guess.
Yes, maybe I can start asking questions.
Yes, sure.
I would just like to remind you that the session is still being recorded, and at the end of the session, we will stop the recording in case anyone wants to share anything related to EESSI freely. A question, Kaspar. So basically, we saw that we can run some tests which are in EESSI. Are we also able to run tests using the local stack if we have some local stack and compare those with each other, or?
Yes. So if you have a local stack, let me see if I can quickly do this. You see, by the way, some results coming in here. I'll just abort the rest, but just to show you what it looks like. Let me see if I can do this real quick. If I load our local module stack, and I hope that we have Reframe in here as well. Assume so. And let's see if we have a LAMP module. Again, I'm not sure. No. What do we have? TensorFlow. And otherwise, I'll look in the older environment. Yeah, there's a TensorFlow in here. So let's say I now want to list the TensorFlow tests. It should generate a test for this based on this specific module file. So that's 2.18.1 was the version. And there you go. So indeed, if I would now do dash dash run instead of dash dash list, it would run the TensorFlow test based on my local module stack instead of the EESSI module stack. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Perfect.
We have also something in the chat, I guess.
That's just me trying to be funny. If Caspar said Lamps is not available, and I said maybe you should be using EESSI, so it's
There you
available.
go. Are there other questions?
Maybe I know the answer, but maybe it's interesting for the others. What if somebody wants to add a test
Yes.
to the test
Perfect.
suite? How would they start?
You start by joining the happy hour next week because there Sam will discuss how to add the test to the test suite. But to give you a little bit of a sneak preview, so maybe it's also good to just show this where it is in the documentation. If you want to know more about the test suite, under advanced users, there's a header called test suite. And then there's this whole like configuration thing, like how do you set up your reframe configuration file, like what dependencies do you need, what tests are available, but there's also a section on writing tests. So you can already have a sneak peek and look a little bit there. But for sure, join the happy hour next week as well.
Maybe I have an additional question. So basically, who can push data to the dashboard?
Good question. I think the procedure is that we need to whitelist the system that pushes the data. So the database is protected based on IP whitelisting. Of course, we also want to see like, is it relevant in general to EESSI, right? So if your system deploys the EESSI software environment and that's what you want to test and you want to push your results for, I think that's something we're very open to. Like more systems is actually provides a nicer overview, right? More comparisons, like more possibilities to compare between different systems. Although we have to see, like it has to be within reason, right? Also the dashboard, you don't want the amount of results to become too big because then the performance might go down in searching for data. But I think we can scale it quite well. So if you're interested, by all means, contact us on the Slack channel and we can see what we can set up. I think we're also, and this is actually more one of my colleagues that's working on this, looking into possibilities like for create some clear documentation how people could host their own database and their own dashboard instance. So then you could be independent from what we do. And you could also decide to just use it internally, I guess.
Maybe an idea. Of course, that would be nice, maybe so that you have your own instance, but maybe it could be interesting to then push some of the values you have in your own instance to a shared instance.
Yeah.
Could that be an extension?
Sure. I mean, I guess from our side, as I said, we're quite open to get results in that are actually done on the EESSI modules, right? Then I think it's relevant to us. I think the private instances are more interesting if you're not willing to share that data, right? Because for sites, sometimes it's a little bit sensitive. It can reflect the underlying performance of the system as well, right? Like it's a combination of the software stack, the implementation of the test itself, and the underlying system. So some sites are a little bit wary and they don't want to, show all of the results that they get on their systems, and that might be a good reason to keep things internal.
Sure, I understand. So I was just thinking that because you showed easily that you can easily run the tests for the local software stack also. Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe some sites wouldn't have easy and they were still interested in having this overview
Contributing
over
it somewhere.
performance over time.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you mean but why wouldn't they set up their local test instance?
Yeah, they don't know that they would set up their local test instance and maybe at some point they also add easy and then they would just want to push only the easy data.
Yeah. So that's possible, right? So typically Those would have to be two different test suite runs anyway, because if there's
Okay.
duplicate modules,
Mhm.
so if there's two LAMPS modules, for example, so suppose that I would have a LAMPS module internally and externally, and they would have the same version, right? So if I then load my local module stack and the EESSI software stack, and I try to run the test suite, it will tell you I can't do this because you now have two identical modules in the same environment, and it cannot reach the module that is last on your
Yeah.
module path. Basically, it doesn't know how to.
Yeah. Makes
So
sense.
then you would basically set up two separate test runs and just push the ones that are done on the EESSI software environment into the public dashboard.
Yeah. Okay. Do you ever have HPL in the test suite?
No, we don't. It's one of the things, like, I don't know again how easy it is to make that portable, right? And if you would get close to the theoretical performance, I don't know, but we can see. Probably not, huh, Kenneth?
It's pretty hard to tune, but getting it to run is simple.
Yeah. So we can probably add it, but we just haven't done so yet. And I mean, it needs to come with a clear label, right? Like this is not it's not a benchmark. So if
Yeah.
people
So,
expect that this will bring the most out of their system and then you rely on that number, no, that's not the case. But you should be able to see, like, I don't know, if you suddenly have thermal throttling because your cooling system is not working anymore, then you might notice, right?
yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that for the applications, that's very nice. So for the end users to see, to know what's going on, maybe also. Yeah. Or what to expect from a system.
We're not doing it intentionally and taking turns in questions. But any idea when can we start pushing tests from Easy 2025-06 to the dashboard?
Oh, good one. I mean, I guess it's up to us. As soon as we start running this on one of our systems, we can push it. I guess the one thing we should look into is, like, do we just want this separated out by module name, or should we create a group out of that, right? So that's something that we could consider doing, like change the current group into Easy 2023-06 and then make a group Easy 2025-06. I guess that's something we could consider.
It could be an environment, right? Or no, wait, what's
What is environment? Environment is no, so this is a reframe thing actually. So
okay?
reframe has a concept of programming environments, and then if you define multiple programming environments, you have multiple options here. Our tests only run with the default programming environment because programming environment is typically system specific, like what kind of, I don't know, if you have specific Cray compilers or something like that, you would have a different programming environment.
Could be interesting to see if there's performance changes in versions of a software.
Yes, so that's something we've also considered. Like, can we make it easier to compare? Like, based on module name, you can already compare, right? So you could fix the rest and say, like, okay, I'm looking at one skill, one particular system, one particular test, and then I could say, like, okay, I want both software versions, and I want instead of coloring by skill, I want to color by module name. And now you see they're identical, right, for this particular test. So that already gives you some comparison capabilities.
Nice. There's a lot of potential in the dashboard and the tests, of course, also.
Yeah. There's a lot of options that you can play around with for sure.
Just another question. How many Euro HPC systems push their data here now?
Oof, all good questions, and I don't immediately know the answer. So we used to have test runs on Vega Carolina. Did we also do Decalion? I don't know. I don't think so. But I'm not sure because we lost access to those, right? Our allocation expired there. I'm not sure why. Oh yeah, but we didn't. We decided not to make that public because we weren't sure if those sites would agree with that. So basically, the clusters that you see here are all managed by one of the partners in the EC consortium, let's say. So we all agree, okay, let's make this data public. That's fine, but we never really got an official green light from those sides. So we
No,
never.
I think the data is actually public because it's the start date that's not making them pop up.
Is it?
If you go
In
to
that case, we did decide in the end to make it public.
yeah, I think we got an okay from at least Vega, and for Carolina, we
Yeah,
raised
I
the
think they
question
mentioned
and they didn't
it.
raise any concerns.
Yeah.
So you have to go back far enough indeed because we stopped running the test suite. Yeah, you need an allocation. So we had a development project that's valid for a year. After that year, it ends.
But then not for. Okay. Now I have a single system.
My intention was
Yeah,
basically
Vega is here now, and Carolina as well.
like my intention was through the dashboard with different systems, we can also see like different hardware, how they are interacting, different interconnects, and the same software stack running on different systems. We can easily have a clear view of how performance is like different.
Yes, but be aware it's not tuned to the particular system, right? So,
Sure.
for example, on Vega, I think they had, if I remember correctly, it was Vega or it was Carolina. They had hyperthreading enabled. Yeah, our tests take some decision, right? So they launch one rank per physical core or something like that. That might not be the optimal way to go on that particular system, right? And for example, TensorFlow is a hybrid application, so you can do OpenMP and MPI parallelism. We make a certain decision of how many OpenMP threads we launch and how many MPI ranks we launch, right? And that's kind of a standardized recipe, but it's not tuned in any way to a particular system. So the performance that you would see here, yeah, it gives you some idea, but it's not guaranteed to be the highest performance you could get out of that particular system.
Another idea, could one use this as a user? Could one use this information to figure out what is the best system for my use case for what I want to study? I mean, the test you run is probably very limited in terms of what kind of functions you use, and it could be very different to what you need as a user. But
Yes.
maybe you get some idea.
Well, okay, some idea, maybe. But indeed, as you said, like the tests are usually quite specific, right? The goal is regression testing, so spot performance changes.
Okay.
And we want to keep these tests relatively short because if we want to run this on a very regular basis, you need them to be relatively light, right? Otherwise, it consumes too much resources. So indeed, we typically test one particular function. So for TensorFlow, I think we test one neural network, whereas you could do tons of different things in neural networks, right? So yeah, I don't know. For an individual user, I'm not sure if it's going to be super informative. If you see an issue on a particular system, though, like, I don't know, I get the feeling that something changed, 2 weeks ago in terms of communication performance. I could actually go into the test suite and check the low-level OSU test to see, hey, does that actually reflect the same change? And if so, then indeed something was wrong, and I can point the user support to it, right? I can say like, hey, from this date onwards, we see an issue with your communication performance, and it's affecting my end user application.
I have more ideas. Maybe I should stop to give the floor to others ask questions. Do we want to still record, or should we stop recording and then others can ask if they want?
So if anyone would like us to stop the recording before starting asking questions, please let us know. Else, feel free to ask anything. At least I will not be asking anymore.
I think now's a good time to stop the recording and go into informal mode. Yeah.
Okay. Stopped on my end.